The situation is the best that can be for the Middle East and all the world, all the free world, because now we are in the path to a different regime in Iran.
I think this war was no needed. It's only for political things, only for Bibi to stay on the government.
As the death toll rises and instability continues, Netanyahu will need to be clear about how these conflicts benefit Israelis. He's facing an election this year, an ongoing corruption trial, and is wanted at The Hague, accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. Alexandra Byers, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guest. Alon Pinkas is a former ambassador and consul general of Israel in New York. He joins us from Tel Aviv. Rami Khouri is a distinguished fellow at the American University of Beirut. He joins us from Boston. And in West Jerusalem is Mitchell Barak, founder of Kivun Research, Strategy and Communications, and a former aide to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. A warm welcome to all of you. Mitchell, going to start things off with you and just get us a broad brushstroke of how you see things unfolding.
First of all, I'd like to wish a Ramadan Kareem to all of the people watching who are celebrating and commemorating this holiday. It is also a fast day in Israel, the Fast of Esther, which commemorates, ironically and interestingly enough, the victory of the Jewish people over an evil Persian empire 2,500 years ago. So this is a holiday week for everyone. Kids are off from school anyway, tomorrow and the next day. So now they have the full week off. And it really is coming to life, this whole Purim story, this whole story of Persia and defeating an evil empire. But I must say that a lot of people are really behind this effort because they believe the words of the Islamic Republic of Iran that has been saying for many, many years that Israel has no right to exist. Death to America, death to Israel, like we just heard the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of War of the United States say in a live press conference.
Rami, it's very easy to start a war, but it's very hard to end one successfully. So one has to look at the aims here.
Well, I think the aims are pretty clear from the American and the Israeli side, and they've been talking about this for years. There's nothing hidden. They want to get rid of Iran's nuclear enrichment capabilities, make sure it never has a weapon, which is the aim that Iran itself says it never wants a weapon, but that's secondary because the Israeli and American governments tend not to deal with reality, but they tend to deal with what they perceive to be dangers to them or ancient myths from thousands of years ago. In either case, the clear aim is to get rid of the nuclear capability, no more missiles, no more linkages for Iran with its allies across the region, who the Israelis and Americans call proxies, but we call them their strategic allies. And they want, I think what most people would want is to live a normal life in peace. But there's a bigger dimension to what Israel is doing, which is not often sufficiently discussed or analyzed, and the Israelis have to clarify this. They would like to make sure that nobody in the whole Middle East and all of West Asia can possibly threaten them, which in itself is a kind of reasonable aim. Every country in the world wants that. But they also want to be able to determine how things are done in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Iran, in Palestine, in Yemen. They want to have a strategic hegemonic dominance in the region without formally occupying these countries. And this coincides with a rising right-wing messianic, religious, ethnic, nationalist, extremist, militant trend in Israel, which is in the government now. And even government officials have talked, some ministers have talked about, oh yeah, it's okay, so mirroring what U.S. Ambassador Huckabee said, oh, Israel should go and, it's okay if it wants to take over Iran or Syria or Iraq, whatever the Bible says. So we have these wider dimensions that are troubling, and the immediate issues of nuclear and missile issues, those can be resolved. I think there's no doubt about that. But the wider Israeli goals are much more problem.
Alon, the UN nuclear watchdog chief Rafael Grossi said on Monday that his agency stands by their assessment. There's no indication that Iran's nuclear facilities have been damaged in this latest barrage of strikes on the country. So does it make it even more clear that this is all about regime change fundamentally?
Well, look, President Trump, Rashid, went on record in June saying that, quote unquote, we obliterated Iran's nuclear capabilities after the American/Israeli attack on three major nuclear installations. Furthermore, American intelligence has indicated, under the Trump administration, by the way, that Iran has not pursued or has not developed its military nuclear program beyond what it did since the U.S. left the agreement, left unilaterally, withdrew from the JCPOA in 2018. In May of 2018, that was under Trump's first term. Now, ostensibly, yes, both the U.S. and Israel claim that this is about regime change. How they plan to go by this, look, there's no instance, there's no example in history for regime change being induced via air power and missile attacks, bar one example, one unique example, and that's Japan in 1945 under the threat of a very credible land invasion and following 2 atomic bombs. So that is definitely not the case. How the U.S. and Israel plan to induce regime change or just weaken the regime remains unclear. Look, we're only 48 hours into this war, and making any kind of broad brush assessments or conclusions that this is going into X or toward Y would be seriously and wildly premature. But yes, in terms of what you just asked, it looks like regime change, and Mr. Netanyahu attested to that himself in that video that you just, in that footage that you just showed a moment ago, that this has been his dream, his yearning, he called it, for 40 years to change the regime. He's, in his defense, he's been consistent and adamant about this, but this is not about nuclear power. This is about regime change.
Mitchell, how does killing the supreme leader move the needle?
Well, this is the head of the snake for many, many years. This is the person that has sponsored terrorism all over the world and has proxies. You can call them, Rami, strategic allies, but many of them are terrorists. We've had diplomats, people that Alon Pincus knew, who were killed in Argentina. I mean, based on operations and funding from the Islamic Republic of Iran. And, there's talk about the destroying of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. What revolution are they protecting? What Islamic Republic actually lobs missiles at innocent civilians in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia? Who does this? Meaning, why would people stand for this? Why would the world stand for this kind of threat? This man was a dangerous menace to humanity, and it cloaked himself in religion. It's a very, very difficult thing. And it was directly threatening, said that Israel has no right to exist, and on many occasions said Israel will one day no longer exist, and he will make that happen. And, sometimes you have to take neighborhood bullies like the Islamic Republic of Iran at their very words. And if they say they're going to do it, and everything indicates that they will, then they actually will. And the sad part of this whole thing is when the revolution started in 1979, they've poured hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars and know-how into better ways to kill Jewish and Israeli people and better ways to promote terror. And imagine what would have happened if they invested all of that money. And they're very, very smart. They've developed some great missiles that have hit Israel and gotten through our defenses. What if they invested that money in healthcare, finding a cure for cancer, agriculture, poverty? They could really have a great place in Iran. But instead, they invested in death and destruction and ideology. It's sad.
Rami.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fascinating explanation from Mitchell about what is traditional Israeli Zionist perspectives. Well, most of it is exaggerated, diversionary. Some of it is not true. And most of it is not really relevant. It's just the traditional way that the Israelis and pro-Israeli groups discuss these issues. I mean, the idea that it's bad to fire missiles at civilians after Israel has been called by the International Court of Justice a genocidal state for killing tens of thousands of civilians in Gaza. So, but we don't have time to get into these point by points. We should do that one other time over coffee somewhere. The reality is that the state of Israel is the power in the region with the United States. They're the ones that have been going around, and essentially one after the other, starting with Iran and then Syria, Libya, Iraq, starting with Iraq, I mean, and the Palestinians and Lebanon, hitting anybody who they think threatens them. It's fair enough for countries to want to live in peace, and the Arab countries, including Iran, by the way, Iran has said for many years that they will live with whatever agreement the Palestinians agree with Israel on. And the Palestinians, through their institutions, have said they're willing to live with a Jewish majority Israeli state if it lives with a Palestinian state. So we should focus really on what actually is happening on the ground. And the bigger threat, I think, that we see is Israel trying to destabilize countries and fragment them into smaller entities. We've seen it in Lebanon, we've seen it in Iraq, we've seen it in Syria. We've seen in Palestine, they try to make deals with minority groups in different countries. They don't want any strong, stable, legitimate countries around them that could challenge them, not necessarily challenge them to destroy them, but challenge them to force the Israelis to do things they've never done, which is to define their borders, implement the UN resolutions that Israel said it would implement. Israel never implemented the terms of acceptance into the UN in 1948. So we really should focus on how can these people live together, Iran, Arabs, Israelis. They can, I believe.
Elon, have a look now at, well, if there is regime change, you know, how does it affect Israel itself?
Well, depending on the regime. I mean, people were talking about regime change in Iraq and Syria, and we got ISIS. People were